The Need for Speed Underground update for Drift and Drag for Unbound has been out for a little over a week now, so I figure it's time to put out my 10 favorite builds, one for each class in Drift and Drag. Let's go! Alright, before we get into the video, I did a ton of testing and driving on each of these cars. It is insane the amount of time that it takes to come up with builds for Need for Speed. It just takes so long because there's literally nobody in the free roam lobbies that will accept invites, and so it took me a ton of time to get these builds together. So that's why it feels like it's a little bit late. I wish I could have had some of these builds out last week, but I just didn't feel comfortable with where they were at. Now I do, but keep in mind, these are work in progress. Like, I'm still testing all of this stuff. There is a ton of stuff to test. Like, just one car alone could have, you know, up to 10 engines and in the 5 classes. So you're looking at 50 different builds for the engine only. Now throw in 4 different gearboxes and you multiply those 50 builds by 4. That's 200 builds for one car. It's insane. And people don't accept invites. So anyways, I obviously did not test 200 builds per car. I'm just trying to narrow it down to the ones that I feel are the best with the engine and gearbox combo that seems to perform the best or has the best stats. Anyways, it's a lot of money that's involved, and I have not used any cheats to get my money, and so there's a lot of playing that has to happen to get these out. Anyway, I feel like I'm just making excuses. Let's get into the builds, man. Let's start with Drift. In B class, I really like Melissa's custom Eclipse. Now, if you don't have the Melissa's custom Eclipse, you can just use any of the Eclipses, just buy the Eclipse from the store. This car's strength in B tier drifting is its control. It doesn't over-rotate, and it transitions at a pretty moderate pace, so it's an excellent choice for players who struggle with control. In A class, we have the Nissan Skyline R32. This is again a build focused on control. This one transitions just slightly faster than the Eclipse, but it isn't wild. It scores pretty well provided that you keep the right lines and can hold a chain pretty well. I know holding a chain is something that players struggle with, so just a little advice here. Make sure you're swinging the car quickly when you transition. You almost have to do it like in an unnatural state for the chain to hold. Just keep practicing, you'll get it, and this car is actually going to help. Now, in A+, we have the Mitsubishi Evo X. This build is focused completely on transitioning and speed. It will take a bit of getting used to in order to control the car, but once you do, you'll be snapping off huge chains and scores. If it wasn't for my S Plus build coming up in just a moment, this would definitely be my favorite drift build so far. In S, we have the BMW M3 Competition Touring Wagon. This is a free car unlocked with the Speed Pass, and this car has a ton of power, which means you shouldn't feel too worried about dropping your drift in slow corners, and it accelerates so well that it's easy to break off some really nice long drifts on straight or semi-straight sections of the courses. Also, because it's an all-wheel drive car, the control it offers is top-notch. Alright, and in S+, we have the Murcielago. This is my favorite build of the bunch. It gets a ton of speed, it chains better than anything I've tested so far, and some of you might be thinking the chain is really sort of up to you, and you're right, sort of. The build also matters because the reason you drop the chain is that your drift ends for a short moment. You can tell because your smoke goes away for a short moment, and you'll notice the next time you see the chain, it'll say chaining 1. Well, with this car, you really don't have to worry about that too much because it has so much power to the wheels that it feels like it's always spinning those tires. It transitions very, very well, and it offers a very good amount of control. Well, as much as you can have in the S Plus class anyway. Sometimes it's a little bit wild because the amount of power you have is just insane. Alright, that's it for the drift builds. Let's move into the drag builds. I did quite a bit more testing in drag than I did in drift, and some of these are the fastest builds that I could come up with, but I want to be honest here, like I said in the intro, these are still a work in progress, and there may be some cars out there that can run better times. These just happen to be my favorites so far. Until we find the fastest builds, I really don't want to make any claims. That's why the title of this video is my favorite drift and drag builds, not necessarily the fastest. Alright, let's get into it. In B class, we've got the M1. This one does pretty well, but I wouldn't say it's OP. I've beaten just about every car I've faced, so I do feel it's really solid, but I think there's potential for a better car out there. I love the M1 in general, and that's really the reason it's on this list, and it's the reason I built it. I think the majority of the wins that I've got in this car probably happened because I know how to drag race, and I don't really miss my perfect shifts or the perfect starts that often. Anyways, let's move on to A class. In A, I like the Mustang Fox body. This is an absolute beast in this class. The way it's built makes it so easy to get the perfect shift as well. I'm glad to see the old school muscle cars are strong in this mode, because drag racing has always been dominated by American muscle in real life, and this one's no exception. This Fox body is very, very good. I think this is going to be a great fit for you and a solid option going forward. And speaking of muscle cars, in A+, we've got the Dark Horse. Now, I really wanted to have a Dark Horse build in this list, so I tested every class for this Dark Horse, and from my testing, A+ seems to be its best. I don't know if you caught what I just said. I tested this car in every single class. That's 5 different classes, 5 different builds, times the number of engines, times the number of gear. I tested a ton of options for this Dark Horse, and A+ really seems to be the best option. Now, there could be something I missed out there, and I do think I could try a few more things to make it even faster, but it feels very solid where it's at right now, so I felt comfortable putting it out there in this video. Now we move into a couple of cars that are just absolutely insane, like running times I've just never seen before while testing. This Fairlady Z in S is really crazy. I remember testing the Fairlady against the Regera in terms of acceleration a couple months ago, and the Fairlady actually kept up with it using this engine, so I figured it would probably be pretty good in drag applications, and oh my god, I was right. But also, in building and testing so many drag cars, I started playing around with various builds and found out that you can actually dump a ton more power into the car by reducing its perf rating with off-road parts and drift handling. So it seems that on cars that I've tested, at least, the off-road parts reduce your perf rating, allow you to put a bunch more power, and the car goes faster. So I don't know that the suspension and the tires really have anything to do with the drag mode. It seems like all the cars sort of are set up the same, kind of, no matter what suspension and tires you put on there. Anyways, those things just really haven't affected the drag mode so far, so it's just a cheeky way to make your car faster. In this case, this car really benefits from it. Also with this car, I tested every single gearbox option it has, and the 7 and 8 speed were easily the fastest of the bunch, but the car is very difficult to get the perfect shifts with because the gears are so short in 7 and 8. And so for me, I chose the 7, and it actually ran a little bit faster times, gives you a little bit more time to react because the gears are slightly farther apart than the 8. You can literally use any of the gearboxes though, because the car runs insane times and it feels broken anyways. But if you prefer to run something that's way easier to drive, you can put the 5 speed in there. It's gonna run slower times, but you're probably gonna beat most people, unless you're running into another Fairlady driver who really knows how to drive the 7 or the 8. You'll probably lose. Anyways, enjoy the crazy with this one. It is ridiculously fast. All right, so for S+, I actually have 2 builds for you because there's 2 cars that I actually really enjoy driving. These builds were tested extensively as well. I tried every single engine and gearbox combo, and I feel like I have the best builds for each of these cars. I'll start with the simple one first, Bugatti. This car only has 1 engine, so testing it was pretty straightforward, and it's honestly the reason I started testing it in the first place, because I knew it wasn't going to be that difficult. The 7-speed gearbox performed the best. This car runs a 31.81 on Jeff and Rose, a 1659 on South 8th Street, man that's hard to say, South 8th Street, whew, and then a 20.61 on Southland Drive. Those are very solid times, and this Bugatti is a breeze to shift. It is so easy to use, so I do recommend it for players who are having a hard time hitting those perfect shifts. But the king right now in S+ is the Boss Mustang. Again, I tested every engine and gearbox combo, and the 1035 horsepower 6.3 liter V12 with the 7-speed performed the best by a fairly wide margin. Actually, the 6-speed was close, but the gears are slightly longer, and you can't get your 3-bar burst as fast as you can in the 7 because the gears are shorter in the 7, so you're shifting a little bit faster. And so that 7 actually ended up prevailing. You get your 3-bar slightly earlier, and then you get your next bar just slightly earlier than that. So you end up just getting to top speed a little bit faster. But take a look at the times I was able to run with this thing. 31.81 on Jeff and Rose. It's actually where this car struggles the most, if you can even say that word with this car. And it's just because it's a longer course and your car is just hitting top speed super fast, and it's not as fast as the Bugatti. The Bugatti can run at 245 whereas this one stops at around 236. Side note though, I noticed that when you're in 6th gear, the RPMs start to drop. You never actually get to 7th gear. The only reason you're using the 7th gear is because the gears are shorter. But when you do get to 6th gear, the RPMs start to drop a little bit and the car bogs a little bit, which means you can actually just downshift into 5th, and then it puts you right back into the perfect shift zone, and then you can just upshift into 6th again and get a perfect shift. You can actually get like an unlimited amount of perfect shifts and NOS with this car. It's just a technique that you can use on a variety of different cars. This one happens to be very easy to use. Other cars you can downshift, go back up, and sort of miss the perfect shift as well. So it's a little bit of a risky situation. This one's not risky at all. You downshift, upshift again, you've got a perfect shift, and you can just keep doing that, as you can see from this background gameplay. Anyways, a 15.75 is what I ran on South 8th Street, which is absolutely insane. It's the only 15 I've been able to run on that course with any car I've tested, and a 19.81 on Southland Drive, which is, again, crazy fast to go under 20 on that one. Absolutely insane. Anyways, those are my favorite builds so far, and of course, like I said, I'm still testing, and these builds may or may not change, but you can check the Need for Speed Builds app that I've got linked in the description for all of my builds and a bunch of builds from the community, from members who are just submitting builds on the website. You can go to the website, submit your builds, and all of the builds that get submitted there, I'm just going to be throwing into the Tunes app, and you guys can check them out and browse the various builds from the community. Anyways, link to all that stuff is in the description. I really appreciate you guys watching and making it through to the end of this video. Thank you so much. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.